November 1944. The Moselle River, France. The temperature had dropped below freezing 3 nights before, and it had not come back up. The men of the Third Army lay in the mud, bleeding, shaking, staring at a sky that offered nothing. Wounded soldiers had been crying out for 6 hours. 6 hours. Their voices had dropped from screams to whispers. Some had stopped making sound entirely, which was worse. The mud was not just cold. It moved. It breathed. It pulled men down as they tried to drag themselves toward cover, and it swallowed what little warmth their bodies still had left. Sergeant Dale Mercer, 23 years old, had a wound through his left shoulder that had gone untreated since morning. He could no longer lift his arm. He could still feel it, which the medic said was a good sign. But the medic had said it 4 hours ago and had not returned. Private Thomas Rule, 19, had shrapnel in both legs. He had used his own belt as a tourniquet. He had used his jacket to cover the man next to him. He was shaking so hard his teeth had cracked against each other. No one had come for them. That was the part that made no sense. The fighting had slowed. There was a window. There had been a window for hours, and still, no one had come. What Patton did when he discovered why no one came would become one of the most retold stories of the entire European campaign. Before we go further, if you believe real leadership deserves to be remembered, subscribe now. This channel exists to tell the stories history almost forgot, the ones that reveal what command actually costs. Stay with us. General George S. Patton did not arrive at the front that morning looking for a confrontation. He was moving between positions, checking lines, reading the terrain the way a man reads a face, watching for what wasn't being said. His aide rode beside him in silence. Patton had not spoken in 20 minutes. He had seen the casualty reports. He had seen the coordinates of where men were down. What he had not seen was movement toward those coordinates. That absence was beginning to feel like something. The road curved. The farmhouse came into view. It was a stone building, solid, intact. Someone had requisitioned it. That was not unusual. Officers needed command posts. Patton understood that. What he noticed first was the chimney. Smoke. Steady, thick, unhurried smoke. The kind that means a fire that has been burning for hours. The kind built for comfort, not warmth. There is a difference. He stopped his vehicle. He sat for a moment without moving. His aide said nothing. Patton's jaw tightened in a way the aide recognized and feared. He stepped out of the vehicle and walked to the door and opened it without knocking. The heat was the first thing. It came out like a wall. After hours in the freezing mud, the heat in that room was a physical object, something you could push against. Patton felt it and said nothing. There were 4 officers inside, a captain and 3 lieutenants. They had a fire going in the stone hearth that could have heated a barn. They had food on a folding table. They had chairs pulled close to the flame. One of them had his boots off. The captain stood. He began to speak. Patton raised one hand, slowly, and the captain stopped. Patton looked at the fire. He looked at the food. He looked at the boots drying on the stone. He looked at each face in the room, one at a time, and he took his time doing it. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed loudly. Then he spoke. "Captain, how many of your men are still in the field?" The captain said there had been enemy fire. He said the window had not been clear. He said he had been about to send a team. Patton listened to every word. "How many of your men are still in the field?" The captain gave a number. 14. 14 men still out. 6 of them wounded. The youngest was 18 years old. Patton had been told this in the briefing that morning. He had already known the number. He asked, because he needed the captain to say it out loud, standing in front of that fire, with his boots off. What happened next did not involve shouting. That is the part veterans always mentioned when they retold the story. People expected Patton to explode. He did not explode. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that one of the lieutenants shifted his weight, and the floorboard creaked, and the sound felt enormous. Then Patton said, "You are warm." 3 words. He let them sit in the air. He looked at the captain. He looked at the fire. He looked back at the captain. 14 men are in the mud, and you are warm. He turned and walked to the hearth and stood with his back to the room for a moment, looking at the fire and then he turned back around, and his voice had changed into something quieter and more dangerous than anger. You will go out there yourself, not a team. You, personally. You will lead the extraction. You will carry equipment. You will walk out into that field and you will bring those men back. And if you return before every one of them is inside a medical tent, I will find out. The captain said something about enemy positions. He said something about protocol. Patton stepped toward him. One step. He lowered his voice further. I don't want to hear about positions. I want to hear about Dale Mercer. I want to hear about Thomas Rule. Those are names of men. You have a number. They have names. Go learn the difference. He turned to one of the lieutenants and told him the farmhouse was now a casualty station. The fire would remain. The food would remain. The chairs would be used by wounded men. Every officer currently inside this building would sleep in the field tonight. He walked back to his vehicle. He did not look back. The captain led the extraction himself. He walked out into the mud with a stretcher on his back and the temperature still below freezing and enemy lines close enough to hear voices. It took 2 hours. He did not stop. He brought all 14 men back. Mercer lost the use of 2 fingers, but kept his arm. Rule walked out of the field hospital 6 weeks later. The youngest, Private First Class Eugene Hatch, 18 years old from Dayton, Ohio, had a head wound that would give him headaches for the rest of his life. He lived until 1987. The story moved fast. These things always did. By nightfall, it had reached 3 other units. By the following week, officers across the Third Army were telling it the way people tell a story that is also a warning. The farmhouse became a kind of shorthand. Don't let Patton find you in a farmhouse. That phrase spread before the story did. Veterans who wrote memoirs decades later returned to it. Not because of what Patton said, but because of what he didn't say. Because of the way he looked at that fire. Because 3 words did what an hour of shouting could not do. You are warm. He had not invented a new rule. He had not written a new order. He had simply made a man feel, fully, in his body, the weight of what comfort costs when other men are suffering for it. That is what leadership looks like when rank is removed from the equation. Not authority, not volume, not threat, a mirror. That, the ability to make a man see himself clearly, without mercy and without escape. Leadership is not the title on your uniform. It is what you do with the warmth you have been given while others are still in the cold. Patton understood something that comfortable men forget. Rank does not protect you from what you allow. It implicates you in it. The question the story leaves behind is not about Patton. It is about the captain. It is about the moment he stood in that room, in that heat, and heard 14 names collapsed into one number. It is about the distance between knowing and feeling. He knew the men were out there. He simply had not let himself feel it yet. What would it take for you to feel it? Not in wartime. In whatever field you are responsible for. In whatever cold you are allowing. While you stand near a fire. Where would you have stood in that room? If stories like this matter to you, stories about what leadership actually costs, what sacrifice actually looks like, what history almost let us forget, subscribe now. New stories every week. Real ones. The kind that leave a mark.